Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Fahim Niaz. I'm the product manager for Anime Studio, and today we have an absolutely special webinar on frame-by-frame animation with Charles Kenway. Many of you know Charles Kenway from the Lost Marble forums. He goes by the handle Chucky, and Charles has been involved in the business of creating animations for a very long time. He has expertise over a broad spectrum of products. And from my belief, I think his Anime Studio prowess is none to match across the board. He has created some fantastic pieces that he's shared with us over the years, and he's actually created some pieces for the Anime Studio 11 launch. And today he'll go through some of his workflow in relation to the newest and most compelling feature in Anime Studio 11, which is frame-by-frame animation. But before we start the webinar, there's a couple things I wanted everyone to know about, housekeeping items. Number one, everyone will be muted, so please be aware of that. If you have any questions, please make sure to ask them in the questions section. We will try to address as many questions as possible throughout the webinar, mostly towards the end of the webinar. The last 15 minutes of it will be dedicated to that. And then as well, if we miss any questions, we will address them either on social media or through the forum. As well, this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on our website within 24 hours. So with that, I'd like to introduce and pass over the reins to Charles, and Charles will take over the presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Hello. I hope everyone can hear me now. Excellent. Welcome to the webinar, and thanks for saying all those kind things for him. I'd like to reassure everyone he wasn't compelled to say that. This is not a hostage situation. Okay, well, so today we've got this subject of frame by frame. I'll be covering a lot of ground, and I'll try and talk as quickly and clearly as I can about it. And I'll try not to make too many jokes and just get on with business. All right. Okay. So some of you might notice that I'm using a dark interface. This is the style of interface that many pro users like to use. And if you didn't know it was there, it's available in the preferences. You can see it here in the GUI colors under the themes. So that might be useful to some people to know. Okay, another thing that you might want to know, I'm using a Cintiq, and if I might just show you this for a moment. Here's what a Cintiq looks like. So it's one of these type of Wacoms with the screen on it. And I also have this item here, which gives all my shortcuts with buttons that I actually don't know the shortcuts to, like reload tools and stuff like that. So I can explain about that later on the forums or something, or in questions. But now we'll get on with the webinar. Okay, so frame by frame. We all know that if you want to do frame by frame, you have to be able to draw. And in previous versions of Anime Studio Pro, it hasn't been as easy to draw as maybe some in the pros would have liked. But now I've got to say it's come a long, long way. And with that have the brushes, and I'll just explain a few things about that first. So actually what I'll do is outline an overview of what I'm going to cover today. Obviously the main topic is frame by frame. I'm going to show you how to use frame by frame and where it comes from the use of switch layers and how they're related. And then I'll be covering how to use referencing in frame by frame to govern synchronization. I'll also be showing you how to use, very briefly, how to use styles because the brushes are so important in freehand drawing. and including the eraser, the new eraser tool, and the blob and the fill. I'll also quickly cover how to create highlights and shadows using masking in FramebyFrame, and with the referencing helping that along. And then I'll show you how to do in-betweens and these kind of things like adding frames in FramebyFrame. I'll also, part of this is showing you our general workflow, which will include the basic layout and setting up a camera, and even how to do a step camera animation that looks like a cut. Okay, so on with it. First of all, I'll just show you the drawing tools. Freehand being the most important in FramebyFrame. We all do know about how Anime Studio is so strong with the vector, and the drawing tools Freehand with the brushes are still vector. Now, if you saw the sample that was up with the fox and the monkey, some of you might think that that was a raster or imported drawings. In fact, they were all drawn inside Anime Studio Pro using the vector tools. If I might show you, this is just some scribble of one of some of the new brushes and some of the things you might not actually expect from Anime Studio Pro. We can now also we can use the brushes from the library. You can preview them now in a way that wasn't possible before. So here we have a little preview of all the brushes, and with a big close-up of some of the things that are possible. So I've just loaded up this one, this ink styles, and you just do that by double-clicking. So here we go. And what you should do, now let's go down to actual business of drawing. As you see the vector lines, if I do one line here, we can see that these are all vector points, and using the tool we have this smoothing ability. I'll leave the smoothing ability because that was covered by Mike, but it is good for more cleanup and stuff like this, which makes for less points, but it does smooth out the line. But if you're going to do straight out drawing, you probably want to leave it on the least smooth, which has the best fidelity. Okay, also what I like to do is leave auto stroke on, obviously, and just leave auto weld off for the moment. That is great for cleanup, and if you were to have be doing architecture or stuff like that. So I'll just illustrate when that would be useful. If you were to do two lines like this, that's all good, but you want to snip the end off while you're drawing. You put auto weld on and then auto trim, and it'll just trim those lines off. Okay, and then you can also run over the line and press the erase button, which I've hooked up to my Wacom, or Wacom I should say, with the front button being the eraser, and that means you can snip through and just snip these lines off like you can in other programs like Manga Studio. Okay, so back to this. So I'll just leave auto weld off, and let's leave merge strokes on. And I actually like to turn the points off while I'm drawing so that there's no distractions, because if I was to erase, you see that the points show up, and I just find that a little bit distracting. So I turn the points off, which is part of the display qualities here, which is that you see the checkpoint come off or not. All right, so in Studio Anime Studio 11, to draw you normally would pick a style, because this governs across all the frames that you want to draw. If you want to change the style later, you can change its color or thickness or other such qualities, and it'll change it to all the drawings. So it's best to draw with the style in frame by frame, because it'll save you later. So normally if you're going to start drawing, you choose actually none style, because these are how to change the qualities of the styles. And if I was to pick one, let's pick drips here, and I'll make my brush really big. You see, some of the things that you can do with Anime Studio now is something you would never really contemplate before, because of improvements in the brushes. Really, we've got this new method of rendering, which is having merge alpha unchecked, and this is very, very useful. And also, we can save the brush. Now, this is something that you couldn't do before, and it is so incredibly useful, I can't say. So, as you see here, this illustration is of these brush strokes. I tend to do them when I'm using the merge strokes on quite see-through, because they build up on each other like this, and when you render them, before it might come out, I'll just quickly illustrate with this is the new, which is what you kind of expect. The before was more like this. Whoops, I'll change this merge alpha. Oh, okay. That's what are we doing? Ink drips. The color. Oh, that's unexpected. Okay. Anyway, I've got to go on with drawing. So, because we're running out of time already. So, choose none, and then choose the style that you want to draw in. There's a lot available in the library, and so do check them out and do add your own. So I'm just going to go ahead and start drawing something to explain. So if I was to choose stains, now these are all styles that I was using in the stick fight work, and this is one of these styles here. It's like drips, and we have so many different ways that we can. We've got sponges and sort of black brushes that kind of bleed, and if I was to select this here controls independently of the style. So you'll see that that's much lighter now, and it all builds up on each other like that. So normally that's how you do it. You have style as none, and then put a style into here, and then use the style, and the color can be independent. I'm going to do everything pretty much in black and white, but you can see these. All I have to do is change the color here, and it'll change the drip because most of the brushes are set up to tint the brush. Okay, so let's move on now. We've seen the brushes and how they can be used. So obviously, if we're going to do an animation, we want to lay it out first. So let's just choose this for the moment, and I'll just start drawing. You use Alt to change the size of the brush, and just things that you can do now in Anime Studio Pro you just wouldn't even think of doing before. You can actually draw as though you would in a raster program, pretty much, even though this is all vector work as I showed before. These aren't filled shapes, these are just lines just drawn. So I'll just do a little bit of drawing just to show you this. And then I'll show you how we can use layers, and you can build up your illustration to create depth and whatnot. So what I'm going to do here quickly is a kind of a multi-plane picture, some palm trees here, and I'll go right to the background and I'll draw some clouds. Let's use some of this what was it before, which we like, the stains. Okay, this makes a nice watercolory kind of, and you can make these really quite big, okay, to cover some ground. And that's the background clouds, very mysterious. Okay, I use the same brush to do some smoke coming out of our volcano here, and a little bit of transparency up, take it down, and maybe a bit too much, but anyway, let's have a little bit of a lava coming out. Okay, obviously if you're doing this for real, you'd probably want to add particles or something to this to make it look more, you know, more impressive. Okay, so moving on. So you build up a picture layer by layer using the new tools. Where's my scratch? There it is. And that's I'm just going to try and do this nice and quickly. Some foreground elements. Okay, so I might. Well, how's the time going? 20 past. All right, I've got to move on now. So what we've got here is the start of a scene, and I'll be explaining now, which you're dying to get into, is the frame by frame. So just finish my layout. What's this he's drawing? I wonder. Okay, nice. All right, so some more background elements. I won't get bogged down in this. I'll just get on with it. Okay, first of all, I'll just show, I'll need this, the blob brush. It has this draw behind function, which is very, very useful. I can actually draw behind an image. Oh, that's pink. Okay, we can draw behind the brushes on the same layer, which is very, very useful, which gives some it gives opacity to the layer so that it can stay over the top of another one. Unfortunately, I seem to be experiencing some lag, probably because of the webinar recording device, so I'll just be very, I'll just have to not worry about that too much. Okay, so new shape. And this will, what I'm doing here will become apparent in a second. because now I'm going to show you how to do frame by frame. Okay, so let's start a new file. I'll be importing this stuff over into it, but let's go new from template, because this template here I've made, and it will be available on the webinar page, and it explains some very useful things about frame by frame. Okay, so we have all these layers here, and they've been carefully built to accommodate frame by frame. Now, just to explain the basics of frame by frame, what I'll do is make a new switch layer, and that's what frame by frame is. If you look at the layer settings, you'll see that it is this is a frame by frame layer here, and if you see the switch layers, it says frame by frame. If you go to a switch layer, it's actually the same thing, but without frame by frame. As soon as you enable that, apply, you see it changes there. So what do we have? Frame by frame is basically vector layers inside a switch layer. So if I was to draw something simple here, let's go for this, and if I was to turn it into frame by frame, we have these little signifiers down the bottom which adds or copies or takes away frames, and you can set this on one frame, or you can set this on any number you like, this number here. And what this is the like interpolation, if you like. If you go on 2s, it goes to 2 frames, and you see we add a new frame on 2. So what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to set it to 4 for the moment, and we'll be worrying about in-betweens later. But on this particular frame, I will be pressing this, which is duplicate, and you see immediately we get another layer here, which is the same. So when you're in frame by frame mode, you can draw on the top of the group, and it actually draws on each of these drawings here, which is a new frame, back on frame 0, which is so useful. If I demonstrate now, let's just give this a wing. Okay, I'll give it a brush for I'll import everything here, copy, and I'll drag it into here, paste. And that means that we get all the styles come in. Hopefully, oh, they didn't. That's unexpected. They should be there. Why not? Styles. Oh yeah, all the styles I've used have come in. That's great. So back to our butterfly, and I'll choose the scratch, and I'll draw the wing up. Look, ignore the terrible drawing. We'll just have to put up with that, and a wing down. Okay, so we'll fill it quickly. The bucket has had some improvements too, so you'll notice that it just basically fills without having to create a new layer or selecting, without having to select anything and creating a new shape or anything like that. So here we go, bucket fill. It can actually join a gap too, which is also very useful. So here we go, the basic frame by frame function. Oh, let's join this gap manually, I think. There you go. All right, so now we have a basic 2 frames flapping, and obviously the drawing is not very important at this point, But what I'll do is create another frame, an empty frame here, plus, and then what I might do is I'm going to loop this one, and you'll see. Okay, back to 1, great. So loop it there, I think. Cycle. Cycle from this point, here we go, get this right. Okay, anyway, so now we have this butterfly, and you'll see with frame by frame you can alter it like any other group. So let's have this fly down here, okay, and we can show its path, and we can move the path. So this is the basics of frame by frame. For some reason I drew this not on frame 0, so that was a bit foolish. What have we got here? Oh dear. Okay, we must always watch the draw on frame 0, otherwise you get this kind of stuff happening. Also, I'll just copy this back to here, and I've got to move on, so copy back and delete all this. Great. Okay, so now I'll just press output only, and you'll see that we'll move the camera up here. Let's turn all the layers on. Okay, and let's follow this view. And we want to come down to here and I've got this set onto step. That was step. Here we go. Smooth. Smooth. Okay, so now the camera will come along. Background, this middle layer. I'll just increase its size. Now I was going to show you all this stuff about parallax and multiplane camera, which I can assure you can do, but we're just getting a bit low on time, so I'll just have to leave that to the end. Okay, let's just put this in here. So we have this basic idea of a camera. Now, if you really want to get into frame by frame, how are we going for time? 8:30. I've got 15 minutes to do. So what I shall show you is, first of all, I'm going to create a new style. No, I'm not. I'm going to hide this, all this background, and show you just how to get further into the frame-by-frame animation process. Get the right layer here, just get rid of this stuff as it's in the way. Okay, so now to the important stuff. Using frame by frame and using this template, which is very, very useful, we've set up so that you can use all the traditional tools like blue pencil, red pencil, pencil, fill, and you can mask it all. So I'll just show you this in its simplicity first. So the blue pencil, and you'll see why this is all useful to be created first, because these are all referenced layers, and those reference layers actually have copy from the master layer. It copies a whole. It's like a instance of the master layer, and it's very useful in FramebyFrame as you can govern the timing of the child layers using it. So we've started with blue being the master because it is, as you know, the one you normally start with to plan. So let's say something happens here, and leaping out of the bush in the background comes this savage. Oh, let's make sure I've got the blue brush on, blue pencil. I go to none, and then I select the blue pencil, and hopefully that would be blue for some reason. Okay, here we go, blue. All right. Now you'll see this checkbox here. Because it's on none, it will affect and overwrite the blue pencil. So the style is separate to the stroke you're on. So anyway, here we go. Out of the bushes, here we come on our first frame, because you'll see the layers get added as frames, and I'll show you now. So our butterfly comes past. Here it is. Oh. Butterfly comes past. He's coming right past here, and out of the bushes comes this little guy. And he's leaping onto it. Okay, so why would you use FramebyFrame? Okay, sometimes you might be drawing something that is way too painstaking for doing a rig, or because you might have layers overlapping or in a really distorted foreshortening, or changing so quickly that in rotation that a rig is not appropriate. Now, what is really great in animation is to use limited animation, or to switch between, say, a rig and FramebyFrame. Anyway, so let's go on, and if I press this plus button and then I press my onion skins on, we can see that it has added a new layer. So here it comes, and he grabs onto our butterfly, which will turn off its visibility 4, because it's going to become part of the animation now. So now he's got, just to have a watch what's happening here. I'm using the FramebyFrame, and you can see the onion skins here that are indicating exactly what happened in the previous frames, or if I go forward in the frames advanced in green. So move along, and here's another thing, the reason why you might be using FramebyFrame is because if you were to do something like a splash, you don't always want to do it with tweening vector layers. So now in Anime Studio Pro you can have the best of both worlds, really, which is really a great thing. So I'm getting very, very close to time up now, but I'll just run through this and I'll show you a few things. So now you might want to go in for a close-up. So what I'm going to do here is with the camera set, with the interpolation set to step, as you can see, as the default interpolation, which you normally have on smooth. If I put the camera in close, I'll just go to zoom in on that. Kind of effectively have a new scene, and then I'll come back out afterwards. Copy paste. So basically, it's cutting close. Oh, one more frame panel here. Here comes the beastie, cut into a close-up. And he's, in fact, it should be way closer than that. Let's get right in close. He sticks his head out. And this is all just planning layers, so he's got the thing on his head. All right, now quickly I need to show you how to fill and do. We've got about 5 more minutes, so I was going to show you a whole lot more other stuff, but I've obviously been rabbiting on way too much, and that's not going to be possible. So now what I'm going to show you is why you'd have these other layers and what's so useful about this. If you see, if I click on pencil and red and fill and clean, they all have exactly the same frames added to them. That's because they're referenced. And it also means that if I was to, and you would use this basically to do, say, a cleanup version. So here I might go to no style and give it, let's see what color it is. Switch the onions off here and give it a clean line. So, okay. And you might want to use smoothing on this kind of thing. Let's just hide that for a moment. Oh, that was terrible. Forgive the bad drawing. So I'll just do it on the 2 frames here. Oh, he's got the butterfly now. He's caught that butterfly. Okay, and so you'll see I've drawn on these new frames with the clean line. But if I was to change the timing, I would do it on the blue. Because if I change the timing on the blue, the clean line is slave to it. Even if it's hidden, it will do that. Same for the fill, which I'll just use the blob brush for now. You can do a copy of the a reference copy to use the actual fill bucket, but for now I'm going to just use this because I really am running out of time. And then I will show you the highlight, and I will use the highlight style. Now I've already set this up to be masked, which is here, masking hide all, and this one's a masked layer, and it's highlight is here, and it's governed by the fill. More about that in masking tutorials, but I'll just demonstrate what happens if I have styles set to none, and then I select highlight. The color should be a lighter color, obviously. And when I draw...
While drawing, I wanted to ask the participants if they had any questions. Well, feel free to ask them right now. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible as we're nearing the end of the webinar.
Great. So what I should do is just finish explaining. Oops, the highlight. Here we go. The highlight is being masked. So as you can see, I'm drawing it on here, but it's being cut off by the fill layer. And now I'll go to shade and do the same thing with shade, and you'll see that it should be being masked, hopefully. But something's broken down with my system. Why is that? Mask this layer. Okay. Okay, anyway. So if I was to change the timing of the blue layer, I can move even all of these right out, and it'll happen to the pencil and the red and the highlight and everything else. So there you go. In a nutshell, that's how you. Oh, at one point, if you go to another layer and change the timing, it'll break the reference. So always do the retiming on the master layer. But that in a nutshell is how to do frame by frame. Yeah, I guess I'm ready for any questions now.
All right, Charles. The first question is, say you're doing a frame by frame on twos. Would you typically make your first drawing on frame 0, 1, or 2?
You know, I really wouldn't worry about that. You can draw your drawing anywhere you want to. There is no rules in any of this. You're the artist, you're in charge. You can, if you want to do it on frame 150, do it on frame 150. There's no reason why you should be compelled to do anything. Really, there are no rules. So if that answers your question, yeah, do what you want.
Okay, and I think there's another question that's very similar, but I just wanted to make sure to ask it. Apologies if it's repetitive, but it's the question is: does frame by frame start on frame 0? Does that mean that the animation starts on 0 instead of 1, like a normal AS file?
Okay, yes. When you draw, I think what you're asking this, when you draw on a frame by frame layer, you're drawing on the group, but really it's just a trick. You're actually really drawing on one of these layers. As you see, they're all being added. To all these layers, they've all been added. So when you draw on whatever frame you're drawing on, the reality is that you're drawing on frame 0. So because it is a sequential thing, and you want to be drawing in the time that you're set at on the in the chronology, you want to be drawing anywhere in the timeline and not be worried about frame 0 at all. So it automatically gets drawn for you on frame 0, no matter what frame you're at. And that means if you look at the layer, there are no keys on. Otherwise, if you were drawing on a regular layer that wasn't frame by frame, you would see, as I did in the demonstration of the background, I had these annoying keys because I'd forgotten basically about that. And here we go. Here's all these annoying drawing keys because I was not drawing on frame 0. Now you don't get that in frame by frame. So it's such a huge advantage that I might actually use frame by frame even more often for drawing. It might even be a good thing to adopt this process for all drawing layers so that it's on frame 0 and you don't have all these excess keys. Okay. There was one other thing that I was going to show you. Let's have a little look. And it's about switching between rigs and frame by frame. So whilst I'm getting another question, I'll just get that up for you, okay?
Sure. While you're looking for that, maybe you can chat about the Wacom tablet that you're using and what model that is.
Okay, this is the Cintiq 22 HD. It's the last generation, if you like. There is a new one that's the 27 that looks really, really nice. And it really is a great piece of equipment. It's like drawing on a tablet, like a Surface Pro, but they're very small, the Surface Pro, and if they were larger, then that would be great. But if you really want to get serious about drawing on a screen, the Cintiq, it is horribly pricey, but they're a really, really great thing, and I do recommend it. Now, that was a mobile phone attached to the side. You can use a tablet, or you can even use iPhones and stuff like that. It doesn't matter what operating system you can buy. There's always some kind of utility that you can add shortcuts to and turn your mobile device into like a shortcut machine, which I actually would like it if Wacom made their own software for that, because I can actually tell you more about this on the forum, that device, and I can actually give my layout as well, which has all Anime Studio Pro shortcuts on it that I've made custom for there. So I think Wacom, who makes the Cintiq, they should have like that software like that you can put on your mobile rather than the units that they do have, which is their little shortcut buttons. You can't see what the button actually does, and you can't reprogram it in a way that you can recognize it. So anyway, so here we go about this frame by frame to a rigged. If you see this middle section, if I turn on there's a rig here. The first few frames, it's very rough, of course, are frame by frame. Then you can switch to a rig, and then back to frame by frame. Now that would be how a typical production would love to run their show, so that they have all the freedoms they have from being able to turn their character from an awkward position to their standard position, and then use the standard stuff to get them out, and then back to something that they can't really do so easily. Of course, you can. Anime Studio is so flexible that you can always use the traditional binding vector tools with the smart bones are so great. You can do so much with them, but frame by frame is always just one of those things that'll get you out of trouble. Might even be good to plan a shot using the frame by frame and then go back to the other vector tweening to get you out of trouble. I can predict a question here about tweening. So you can interpolate between two different frame by frame drawings, and I'll just show you quickly in a new one here. So I've got Let's go frame by frame. Let's just draw a circle, and then go to a new layer down here. If I go back to the circle and I copy it, copy, paste. Why are the bones appeared? That's unusual. Okay, let's undo that. Maybe I copied something from somewhere else. Okay, so copy, paste. All right, that's good. I'll turn this off. Let's close that up. It's probably interfering. All right, so we've basically got two copies. I don't know what's happening there. That's weird. Two copies of the same vectors. Oh, there's a bone. That's it. That's just weird. Okay. Obviously, that got copied over from the last file, because you can add bones to the switch layers, but that's another issue. It'll be very useful for doing the rig to FBF and rig back again, but let's not get bogged down in that. If we go to, they're exactly the same. If I was to move this down using the manipulate points, not so much, okay, manipulate points, and then I'll give it some kind of distortion. Hold Alt and it maintains its volume, which is good. Okay, so now we've got a frame by frame. If I go to the layer properties, you'll see because it is a switch layer, you go to the switch here and you can interpolate sublayers, press apply, and we'll see that because it's a copy, it should animate. Oh, that's because, why is this happening? Why is this happening? That's a mystery, actually. We might be able to solve that later. But this, in theory, that should definitely tween there. Okay. Maybe Mike Clifton could answer that question for me. I have done it before, and I've seen it working. So I'm a little bit thrown by that, actually. So anyway, any more questions?
Yes, I actually wanted to ask you a general question. I believe you covered this, but maybe you could answer this question quickly. When would you integrate referencing or layer referencing in your frame-by-frame workflow? And then I have a few more questions that are just piling up, so hopefully we can get through this one quickly and the rest as well.
Great. Well, this, like I explained before, this is where I would use the referencing to. I would, at the moment, we're all a bit new to the frame-by-frame in Storyboard Anime Studio Pro, and so as we learn, we'll probably find more and more ways of using it, the referencing. But for me, at the moment, I use it here. These little arrows indicate that these are all referenced, and even though there are blank layers, what's being referenced that is useful is the actual switching from one layer to another, which essentially is the frame by frame. And when I use the master, which you can see, if I go to this and I say right click on it and it says locate original layer, it instantly jumps to blue, just so we know that that is the master layer. That was the one that I did the planning on with the blue pencil. So this is essentially where I would use it to retime the animation, and because all the references are attached to it, they also retime. If I was to retime it away from the reference, you'll see it's broken. So that's why you would use it, is so that all your fill and highlights and all the other layers that are involved in the frame by frame are all synchronized chronologically. Otherwise, without the referencing, when you retime your line layer or your clean line layer or whatever, you'd have to go and separately retime all the other layers too, and that would just become really, really painful. So here you'll see they're all retimed. The fill, see how I'm clicking on the fill, and the red line, which is your corrections or notes or whatever, and all these things. So if you download the template and put it in your template folder in your custom content, you'll be able to access it here, and it'll show up as FBF 720 by 24. Now you can change the project settings. It's called 720 because that's the resolution. You can change the resolution to anything you want and the frame rate to everything you want. I just did that for ease of preview and such things. Okay.
All right, thank you, Charles. Here's another question, more related to fills. How do the fills and the masking work together? If I use the blob brush to fill a shape, even behind, I find I overfill the shape. How does masking work?
Okay. Well, the blob brush, it would overfill if you're not careful, and you can erase the blob brush. It's very useful for that. But if I was to get really serious about filling, I would actually make another copy of, say, the clean layer. I would actually probably, let's go to the layer where I've actually done some clean here and some fill. Make sure everything's not been retimed. Okay, I would actually make a reference, right, of that. And there's the reference, the button to make a reference layer. And that would be clean too, and I would actually call that fill. Let's call that bucket fill. I'll call that bucket fill as opposed to blob brush because we've already got a fill here. So I'd drag that down and I'll put it here, and I'll put the clean right on top so that it doesn't be cut off by the highlight. And then I'll hide the regular fill, so I hide the blue so we can see exactly what's going on here. Now the bucket fill is actually, I'll show you an exact copy. Now what we could do is we could actually kill all the oops, make sure I'm on the right layer. Let's go to bucket fill, and I could kill that whole shape, but as you see, the points are still there. So going back to the bucket, I can now I can fill that. And then you will have it completely inside the lines. And the way that it affects the highlight is because it should be masking it. Let's have a look. I'll see if it does it. If I've set it up so that it automatically masks. Masking, idle, mask this layer. I'm not great at masking. But I'll select the highlight, and hopefully, if I'm on the right layer, it will, yes, it will cut off. Good. So there you go. I'll take that off. Oops. Excuse my wonkiness there. All right, there we go. Highlight. And the masking is what prevents us from drawing on the background, as you can see by the, if I was to move this background up, if I select it, you'll see that hopefully, oh, I must have not set my masking up correctly here. I will mask this layer, masking, something's up. maybe it's definitely working on the, if you go to the website of the forum and see my tutorial on there's a watermelon, and it's another guide to frame by frame and referencing, and you'll see this all working absolutely perfectly. Right now I go under that pressure. I don't know what I'm doing, and let's have a look. I seem to have mucked up my masking, so apologies for that.
I think, Charles, we could probably address some of these questions on the forums. We most likely have to address a ton of the questions on the forums. Why don't I ask a couple more questions? We have time limit. We're at the 1 hour mark. So I'll ask a couple more questions, and then hopefully we'll finish off with some examples of some of the work that you've done using frame by frame. So the first question is, do you recommend lip syncing in frame by frame?
Well, I can't see why not. Absolutely. If you want to, it's all up to you as the artist, I mean, or your boss as the director or producer or whatever's controlling the constraints that either they be a creative decision or a budgetary decision. There's all sorts of reasons why to do, but essentially you can do anything you want. If you want to lip sync frame by frame, go for it. But essentially they're the same thing anyway. Frame by frame and switches are exactly that. All animation and all movies and even comic books, they're basically sequential images. It's a juxtaposition from one image to the next, and the fact is, it's how fast the image is switching from one to another. If you have see a Hanna-Barbera, old Hanna-Barbera thing, they normally do it on 2s. You can see some anime shows where they go all the way down to 6 or 4s, and then they'll really, if you want to see something that's lots of action and something fast where you need to see every detail, they'll ramp it up to 1s, which is every single frame. In film, that's 24 frames a second. So as I explained, the switch layers and frame by frame layers are exactly the same thing. It's just the method of how you draw and on the surface, that's the change. So even if you're using interpolation, so if I was to open this here, which is a vector based using the rigs and bones as you would normally expect from using Anime Studio. This is old style Anime Studio. You'll see it's all keyframes, and if I turn the bones on, you can see all these bones. Right, as soon as the guy starts talking, you can see the audio track in here, and he'll start talking. There you go. He'll start talking. You can see that these layers here, they are essentially switch layers. I have used interpolation because they're copies of each of the layers. They are copies of each one moved to a new position. And I'll just show you the phonemes. So that's the one we're on at the moment. So frame by frame is exactly the same as this. It's just that there's no interpolation on it, but you can interpolate to every frame and it'll be just as smooth. It's just the fact of controlling that. Okay, so there you go. If these weren't set to interpolate, it would switch dramatically, and you'd see it as a sequence of images. But because it's tweening, it fills in the gaps, and you see more like that. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So we've pretty much gone over time. Let's do one last thing before we wrap everything up. Can you show us some examples of the work you've done in Frame by Frame, in particular the stick fight scene that you created for us?
Sure. Okay, if I open up stick fight, hopefully it opens.
That's a large file, so it'll probably take a few
Here we go.
seconds.
It is a very large file. Okay, so we can see here it's frame by frame. I'll just see how well it plays. The GPU will be working very, very hard to show you this, so it'll go blurry in the background. But oh, hang on, what happened? I seem to have closed it accidentally. 1 second.
While we're waiting for it to open up,
Yes.
Charles, did you have any recommendations for any newbies that would be using Anime Studio for the first time? Are there any important things that they should watch out for or keep in mind?
I would say to just just go wild with it and try things that you wouldn't expect to be able to do, because jumping into new programs can be it can be difficult to get off the ground. So basically, if you find something's not working, stick with it. You'll find that it is much, much simpler than you might have suspected. And go to the forum if there's any questions, because there's so many people there who will help. And you know, they help me often when I go to the forum and I just go, hey, what am I doing wrong? And they'll say, you dumb noob. No, they won't, because they're all very courteous, and they'll show exactly what I'm doing wrong. And so yeah, it's just try whatever you want to do, and look for ways to achieve it, because you can do what you would not expect to be able to do, because it's so flexible. That's my recommendation, is just go wild, you know. So this is playing at a very slow rate at the moment. It's just struggling with the computers doing a little bit more than it really should do. But you can see essentially, if I go to the shot here, how it's all done. I've broken that. This file will be available to download and use, won't it, Fahim?
We're actually going to be creating a content pack that will include this file. So it'll be available for folks to purchase. So please stay tuned for that. It will be available sometime soon.
So here you can see all the frames. This is quite limited animation. If I had the luxury of more time, I would have done many more frame by frame, many more frames and in betweening. Which is just another drawing, which is just another switch frame in a frame-by-frame layer. So this one I did before, in the development stage of the frame-by-frame addition to the program. So I don't think I don't know if any of us were aware of what could be done with the referencing at that point. So I was basically having to retime each of these layers, the fill and the line. If you see, that looks a bit funny there, but if I render it, it's just fine. manually, basically. So yeah, there we go. So that's what it looks like, and then there's a lot more animation, I believe. If I go to this fight, is on its own separate little layer. That's the fox and the monkey, and each one has its own set of animation.
Fantastic. Well, with that, I wanted to ask Michi if I could get the reins of the webinar, and I wanted to thank you very much, Charles, for taking the time to prepare for this webinar. I know it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to put something like this together. Thank you. I'm sure that many of the participants got to learn a lot about frame-by-frame animation, and I actually wanted to thank them for joining us and taking part in this presentation and this webinar. And I look forward to them being able to get some answers to their questions, some that were not answered on the Lost Marble forum. We'll put a thread together where we'll try to answer as many of the questions that we could not answer throughout the webinar, and we'll do so on the forum. That way everyone will get a chance to see an answer to their question. So with that, if you guys wanted some more information on Anime Studio, and in particular version 11, please check out our website, anime.smithmicro.com. This webinar will be recorded. It will be placed on our webinar section of our website. That is my.smithmicro.com/webinars. And as well, the forums that we've been referring to throughout this webinar is actually the Lost Marble forum. That's the official Anime Studio forum. So make sure to check us out there. Look for us. Charles Kenway will be there as well. So look out for answers for your questions. And if you have any other general questions outside of this webinar with other things, please feel free to use that forum as a means to getting answers and as a means to learning about our product. As well, if you happen to be on Facebook, please make sure to follow us and like us on Facebook, and then it's just the Anime Studio page there. You can look it up and you can find it pretty quickly. And then also, if you use Twitter, please follow us on Twitter. Finally, if you want some deals on our website or on our products, apologies, please click on or go to the link that you'll see there, my.smithmicro.com/deals, email_list.html. We have some of our most current deals on there, and we have special pricing all the time, so make sure to subscribe to that email list. And as well, if you're an educator or a student, we have some student or academic-based pricing that you can check out, and that's at my.smithmicro.com/campus. And then finally, thanks again, Charles, for all your time. Make sure to check out Charles's website at charleskenway.com. That'd be great. He's got some fantastic work up there that he's done in the past with Anime Studio and some other projects he's worked on. Make sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's got some cool content in there. And finally, he's done some great work in Anime Studio, and you can see some of the artwork there. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Charles, for your time.